The woman poured poison from an apple into a cup of tea, then whispered an incantation before drinking the entire cup. As soon as the spell was uttered, she collapsed and fell into a state of invisibility. This method, passed down through her ancestors, was a way to protect future generations from the man-eating demon pursuers. A few days ago, the old house had welcomed its new owners. The mother turned back and smiled mysteriously, saying to her children, "Welcome to the ancestral home." As the family members stepped inside, they were immediately shocked by a massive apple tree. However, this tree was highly toxic. The mother, Helen, reminded her children never to eat from it. She also didn't know why her grandfather had planted such a poisonous apple tree in the house. Everyone curiously explored the ancient house and discovered a tiny kitchen, fully equipped and even with a gas stove. Everyone was amazed. Though it was clear that no one had lived there for a long time, the roof was even covered with mushrooms. However, the secrets of this mystical old house certainly did not end there. Helen had just divorced and moved her entire family into the house her grandfather had left her. This also gave her the chance to take care of her aunt, Lucinda, who suffered from a mental illness, and to be close to the counseling center for her son Jared. Jared was pleased with this arrangement and chose a room for himself, but on the wall, there were mysterious scratch marks that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. Jared and his brother didn't think much of it. That night, strange events occurred, one after another. Jared was awakened by knocking sounds. He wanted to wake his older brother, but he had already fallen into a deep sleep. The knocking continued relentlessly. Jared, gathering all his courage, grabbed a sword and went outside to investigate. He followed the sound to a room at the corner of the house, quickly opened the door, and thrust the sword inside. Clearly, no one was in the room, but the tip of his sword was stained with a bit of fresh blood. As Jared stood confused, suddenly, things in the room began to fall, and a painting appeared. It was a painting of a man-eating demon, and the signature on the painting was that of Helen's grandfather. At that moment, Jared did not realize that not only did the man-eating demon truly exist, but it also had a deep connection to this family. At the same time, Jared's psychologist arrived at the suspension bridge outside at night. A shadowy figure appeared on the other side of the bridge. The doctor begged the figure to return his daughter to him. He had kept his promise to bring Helen's entire family to the town. The ghost seemed to accept his words and immediately released the doctor's daughter. The father and daughter, who had been apart for so long, were moved and embraced each other. But when Mulgarath looked closely, he noticed that his daughter had become slightly shorter, and the birthmark that had been on her left cheek was now on her right. Mulgarath immediately realized that this was not his daughter. Mulgarath was momentarily taken aback and asked who the person in front of him was, but in response, there was only a smirk full of contempt. In the next moment, a gigantic hand reached up from beneath the bridge, quickly grabbing Mulgarath and pulling him down to enjoy. Seeing that Mulgarath had been dealt with, the ghost on the other side of the bridge slowly approached and revealed its true form as a goblin. The goblin's shape constantly shifted, and in an instant, it transformed into the form of the doctor. These two strange goblins then lived in Mulgarath's house under the guise of father and daughter. They concealed their true forms and secretly infiltrated the town. Coincidentally, a neighbor came to visit, and the daughter immediately considered turning the visitor into dinner. However, the man-eating goblin suppressed her instincts and stopped her, as his goal was the entire town's population. There was a special fruit in the area, and if he could find it, the goblin could gain the power of a god. Until then, he could not afford to make anyone suspicious. If they were hungry, they could only temporarily eat the cats to satisfy their hunger. The next morning, Jared told his family about the strange things he had discovered the previous night, but no one believed him. His sister Mallory immediately checked her things and found no trace of blood as Jared had described. No matter how much Jared tried to explain, they all dismissed it as a joke. After a few days of adjustment, the whole family began to settle into the new environment. However, that day, while Helen was cleaning, she noticed that the ancient tree in the garden had borne a small apple. A childhood memory instantly flooded Helen's mind. She remembered that her aunt had once used an apple to make a potion. Her aunt had told her that when drinking the potion, one must turn their pinky finger outward to become invisible in order to avoid being hunted by the man-eating goblin. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Helen's mother had knocked over the teacup and her aunt had not consumed the poisoned tea. Thinking of this, Helen, overwhelmed with fear, immediately picked the apple from the tree and threw it into the trash. The next day, Helen visited the hospital to see Lucinda, who was suffering from mental illness. Her aunt, who had been healthy before, suddenly gripped Helen's hand tightly upon seeing her and urgently told her that the whole family must leave the town immediately. Only then could they avoid the evil of the man-eating demon. Helen was confused by this, but Jared, who had been eavesdropping outside the door, took note of this warning. Lucinda was then restrained by the hospital staff. The goblin's father and daughter man-eating are observing an egg in the town's museum. According to the staff, it was a dragon egg. Although its authenticity was unclear, it had always been displayed as an antiquity. Hearing this, the daughter immediately opened her mouth and swallowed the dragon egg. After chewing and swallowing, she discovered that there was an embryo inside. The dragon was still alive. Meanwhile, Jared's family was preparing for dinner when the knocking sound from the previous night echoed again. Helen was determined to uncover the truth. She grabbed a stick and struck the wall, and as a result, dried up dead rats were revealed in front of them. Jared was about to say something, but the family dismissed it as just another one of his pranks, as he had done similar things in the past. Frustrated, Jared's brother left the house and went to the town's music festival, where he was drawn to a firefly. But when Simon caught the firefly to take a closer look, he discovered that it had a human face. Simon fearfully threw away the jar containing the fireflies and immediately ran home. At this moment at home, out of curiosity, Jared crawled into the wall that had been broken down. Jared climbed the stairs to an attic, where he found many experimental tools and insect specimens. The painting in the corner was of Helen's grandfather, and beside it was a book about mythical creatures. Strangely, all the pages of the book had been torn out, and this very book was the goal of the man-eating demon when it led them there. The book recorded the characteristics of various mythical creatures. While Jared was still confused and feeling a bit disoriented, the mirror beside him suddenly emitted a sound, as if an invisible force was writing something. When he could finally read the words, Jared quickly turned around and saw a strange mouse. Both of them were startled and frightened. Jared immediately ran away, while the mouse quickly hid and disappeared. However, when Jared went downstairs to tell his mother, Helen simply thought that his condition was worsening. Meanwhile, the man-eating goblin was cutting its hand and dripping blood onto the dragon egg embryo. The embryo absorbed the blood and began to react, but this scene was inadvertently witnessed by a neighbor. The daughter became somewhat angry, and the two demons quickly pulled down the curtains. But not long after, someone knocked on the door. They thought that the neighbor had called the police, so one of the demons opened the door, while the other climbed up to the ceiling, preparing to attack. But when the door opened, it turned out to be Jared and his mother. Fearing that her son's condition was worsening, Helen had taken Jared to see the psychologist in the middle of the night. No one suspected that the person next to them was actually a man-eating goblin in human form. Since Helen's family had returned to the town and opened the ancestral home, strange events had been happening more frequently, and the mythical creatures that had once hidden themselves were starting to appear. However, they were completely unaware of the existence of these creatures. The only person who understood was the aunt, but she had been dismissed as mentally ill and locked away for 40 years. Seeing that the man-eating goblin was about to harm her family again, Lucinda decided not to sit idly by. She took out the green apple she had hidden earlier, dripped its poison into the tea, whispered an incantation, and drank it all. As soon as the spell was spoken, Lucinda fainted and immediately became invisible. She used this opportunity to escape from the psychiatric hospital. Meanwhile, Jared was being questioned by the psychologist. He told everything he had seen and showed the picture of the man-eating demon. Upon seeing the picture of himself, the psychologist, who was actually the demon, had no choice but to endure. What he was looking for was the book that recorded all the mythical creatures. However, the therapy session was interrupted when Helen rushed in, frantic, to inform them that the hospital had reported Lucinda as missing. Everyone immediately went home, grabbing flashlights and heading into the woods with the neighbors to search for her, leaving the children behind in the house. But as soon as the mother and others left, strange sounds began to echo again. As if someone was walking in the attic, the group went upstairs and found a reel of film of Helen's grandfather playing continuously. In the video, he was teaching Lucinda when she was young how to recognize different types of spirits. He explained that some spirits were good, while others were evil. Some feared humans, while others humans had to fear. Upon hearing this, Jared immediately felt a sense of hope, as he wanted to prove that he wasn't lying. However, his siblings just thought that these spirits were merely small insects. To prove he was telling the truth, Jared decided to find the mouse that could become invisible. He sprinkled flour all over the floor and set up a 24/7 surveillance camera. Meanwhile, the group searching in the forest had not found Lucinda after hours of searching, so they decided to go deeper into the woods. However, just as they left, Lucinda suddenly appeared from the shadows. She stealthily made her way to a shop. According to her memory, this place had all the magical ingredients she needed, but after 40 years, it had turned into a supermarket. Lucinda asked one of the employees working there, and surprisingly, he wasn't just a regular worker. He recognized Lucinda. He opened a door at the back of the supermarket, revealing a different world. Lucinda, overjoyed, immediately stepped inside. Meanwhile, everyone else continued their search, unaware of Lucinda's disappearance. Helen happened to come across a blood-stained shoe under the large bridge. It was clearly the shoe of the real psychologist, left behind by the man-eating goblin. Helen immediately wanted to call the police, but as she made the call, a ghostly hand reached out from behind her. Sensing something was wrong, she quickly turned around, only to find that the man-eating demon had transformed back into the form of the doctor. Back at the house, the children seemed to have noticed something strange. The alarm system Jared had set up suddenly went off. When he ran into the room to check, he discovered that the book about man-eating demons was on fire. Meanwhile, Jared's sister, after finishing her search, leaned against the railing to rest. But in the blink of an eye, her hair was suddenly caught and tightly bound to the railing. At this moment, everyone began to believe that there was a mythical creature in the house. But when Jared checked the surveillance footage, he discovered that the person who had started the fire was himself. Now, there was no way out. No matter how much he tried to explain, everyone believed that it was just a prank Jared had pulled. Jared had no choice but to return to his room in frustration. His older brother tried to comfort him, but Jared was still determined to prove the truth. Eventually, Jared found a hidden mechanism after clearing the bookshelf, and a secret passage quickly appeared. The two brothers entered and discovered Lucinda arguing with the invisible mouse. Now the truth was clear, but when Lucinda saw them, she drew a dagger in defense and even took the opportunity to control Jared. This was because all spirits feared iron, and some spirits could shapeshift into anyone. Fortunately, Jared was unaffected, so Lucinda quickly released him. She said that the cannibalistic ogre was always searching for the book, the Elven Compendium. To prevent him from achieving his goal, she tore out all 86 pages of the book and hid them throughout the town, marking their locations with special protective symbols to avoid detection by the cannibalistic ogre. Lucinda had even erased all her memories since she turned 25. She instructed the two to find all the pages of the book, because only with the complete Elven Compendium could they defeat the cannibalistic goblin. If the book fell into his hands, all mystical creatures would be controlled by him, and humanity would become the top of the food chain. Lucinda knew that the cannibalistic ogre would not spare her, so she gave Jared a very important item and told him to keep it safe. After that, Helen happened to return. The cannibalistic ogre, disguised as a psychologist, wanted to take Lucinda away, but on the way back, Lucinda recognized him. Although he had transformed, she could still smell the scent of the cannibalistic demon. Her daughter, sitting in the back, also admitted that she had pretended and burned the book of the cannibalistic demon. They took Lucinda into the forest, where the cannibalistic demon tried to force her to reveal the location of the book. However, Lucinda had erased her memories, so she did not know where the pages were hidden. In a fit of rage, the cannibalistic demon killed her, but no blood flowed from the wound. Lucinda laughed haughtily as her body dissolved into countless petals that vanished before the cannibalistic demon. However, the next day, Lucinda's body reappeared intact at her own funeral. The family, though grieving, quickly organized a memorial service and even played the music that Lucinda had chosen before her death. But when the music started playing, everyone realized that since her mental illness, her state of mind had been quite unusual for her to choose this song. Thus, the solemn funeral turned into a party, with even the spirits in the old house joining in the dancing. Since Lucinda had passed away, Helen's mother also came to the funeral. Melvina declared that she was the rightful heir to the house, but she didn't want to stay even for a minute. She even advised Helen to take the children and leave as soon as possible. Just then, the man-eating demon, disguised as the doctor, entered the room. Seeing that Helen's family truly wanted to leave the town, he knew he couldn't let them go. He had been carefully planning to bring this family back, with the aim of using them to find the spirit beast directory that Lucinda had hidden away. Since the book had not been found yet, he could not allow the family to leave. Fortunately, Helen only intended to leave, but had not actually gone anywhere. The man-eating demon comforted Helen while secretly digging up Lucinda's grave in the night. At that moment, Lucinda was not dead. She was lying comfortably in the coffin, watching her phone. It turned out that the body in the funeral ceremony was just her daughter's shape-shifted form, meant to avoid alarming others. Meanwhile, Jared had been sent by his mother to the Goblin's clinic for psychological counseling. Jared suspected that Lucinda's death was connected to the man-eating demon, so he put metal scraps into cookies to try and reveal the demon hidden beneath its human skin. Everyone ate the cookies, but the demon paid no attention. Furthermore, Jared told the man-eating demon about the torn pages, exactly according to the demon's plan. The demon immediately guided Jared to find the hidden pages in the town. Encouraged by the psychologist, Jared eventually discovered a door with magical signs in the park. However, this door had been protected by Lucinda, and no matter how hard Jared tried, he couldn't open it. Fortunately, after discussing with everyone, they successfully deciphered the clues and opened the magical door. Inside the door, a page from the Spirit Beast directory was found. According to the book's description, they quickly made their way to a lake in the town. If the book was real, this had to be the home of the legendary unicorns. However, in reality, the lake seemed empty. As everyone thought they had been tricked, Jared remembered the important item Lucinda had carefully entrusted to him. He immediately picked it up and looked through it, and the scene quickly changed. At first, the lakeside seemed barren, but through the ring, 2 unicorns suddenly appeared. Meanwhile, at home, Jared's mother, Helen, was sorting through Lucinda's relics. The old TV beside her was still playing videos. It recorded Lucinda's Lucinda's therapy sessions. Helen found it a bit strange, so she went over to turn off the TV. But right after that, the TV turned on by itself, and Lucinda appeared to be speaking to Helen from the screen. Lucinda told Helen not to be afraid or sad, as everything was part of the plan. After hearing this, Helen became terrified and quickly turned off the TV. However, Lucinda's shadow suddenly appeared, and when Helen turned around, the spot was empty. Feeling uneasy, Helen hurriedly left the room. At that moment, a shadow appeared on the wall. The flesh-eating demon, disguised as someone else, had been secretly watching their family. The longer they stayed there, the greater the danger became. Even Mallory, who was passionate about fencing, experienced something strange. To learn from the master Valentina, Mallory had joined her dojo to practice swordsmanship. One day, after finishing her training session, Mallory sneaked into Valentina's office and unexpectedly discovered a photo of Valentina with another woman. Based on the note on the back of the photo, the young woman in the picture was Lucinda, and the photo was taken in 1979. If both were from the same era, then Valentina must have been over 50 years old, but she still looked youthful. Could she also be a spirit? The whole family had been encountering strange occurrences, so they hurriedly returned home. Helen also wanted to take this opportunity to ask her mother about the truth, to find out why she had cruelly locked Lucinda in the mental hospital for 40 years. However, Melvina became extremely agitated and refused to answer, even tearing up the page from the book that Jared and his brother had found. Clearly, Melvina knew something, but she refused to speak about it. In order to prevent the flesh-eating demon from destroying the entire town, Jared and his brother decided to seek help from the spirit their grandfather had left in the house. However, the spirit was not in a good mental state and attacked Jared, injuring him and requiring a visit to the hospital. The flesh-eating demon, disguised as a psychologist, also came to tend to him. When he saw the torn page, his eyes gleamed with excitement, unable to hide his thrill. In his distraction, he accidentally ate one of the cookies with metal shavings that Jared had given him. The demon immediately lost control and gradually revealed its true form. Jared, lying on the bed, was also incredibly surprised. In order to prevent the flesh-eating demon from devouring the town's residents, Jared and his group quickly returned home to make a plan to capture his grandfather's small spirit, Thimbletack, in order to seek its help. Jared's older brother woke up early and went to the forest to gather the type of mushroom that Thimbletack liked the most. However, despite it being the start of the harvest, the leaves in the forest had already fallen, indicating that after the evil dragon was resurrected, it had begun to corrupt the nature around here. The two brothers returned to the attic with the fresh mushrooms, but when the curtain was drawn down, Thimbletack suddenly disappeared in a strange way. The older brother was about to open the cage to check, but luckily, Jared stopped him. Sure enough, when he put on the X-ray glasses, Thimbletack became visible immediately. Thimbletack was angry and unwilling to help because he felt unjustly for Lucinda, who had been locked away in a mental institution. Thimbletack was once a friend of Lucinda's and hated all the members of the Spiderwick family, always opposing them. As everyone was puzzled as to why Thimbletack was making things difficult for them over someone who had already died, Thimbletack revealed that Lucinda was still alive, just trapped somewhere and unable to escape. Thimbletack wanted to rescue her, but couldn't easily leave the protection of the house. While they were still uncertain, the older brother wanted to go rescue Lucinda, but Jared stopped him. Having been injured by Thimbletack before, Jared was cautious and didn't trust the little mouse. He thought it was all a deception, so he quickly covered the cage again. But the older brother was calmer, and after Jared left, Simon secretly reopened the curtain and persuaded Thimbletack to help them with the reason of rescuing Lucinda, as they needed to fight the flesh-eating goblin. Lucinda had made a deal with the Golden Market. To find her, they had to enter the secret realm of the elves, and the only way to get there was to plant the mushroom circle that Lucinda's father had documented. Only by planting the mushroom circle could they sneak into the secret realm of the elves. Jared wondered why they would trust a small elf considered to be mentally challenged, but Simon said that Thimbletack had shown him the 4th page of the book about elves, which contained instructions on how to plant the mushroom circle. Whether it was true or false could be discovered through testing. After discussing, everyone quickly divided their tasks. Jared soon arrived at the mental hospital of the cannibalistic ogre, risking himself for a page of the elven compendium that was hidden there. Jared took out some paint and sprayed it on the wall, then drew a doorknob on it. While his companion was still in shock, a miracle happened. The door handle that Jared had just drawn suddenly began to spin in response to the movement of his finger. The door in the drawing immediately opened, and a page from the elven compendium flew out. The two of them quickly ran away after retrieving what they had come for. Meanwhile, Simon followed the map to an abandoned factory, but he felt as if someone was watching him. As Simon warned of his unease, a blonde girl stepped out of the shadows, but Simon hesitated hesitated to approach her. Although Simon had been close friends with her before, after learning that she was the daughter of a demon, he began to feel anxious. The blonde girl, wronged, immediately lamented that she was not the daughter of the cannibalistic ogre. Seeing Simon keeping his distance, the blonde girl felt heartbroken and stepped back, unintentionally touching an iron object behind her, which instantly burned her hand. This scene was witnessed by Simon's companion. The blonde girl realized that Simon didn't believe her, so she could only leave. Meanwhile, after finding a page from the Elven Compendium, Jared continued toward the large bridge outside the town, but both of them felt a bit fearful, as the book described a giant demon sleeping beneath the bridge. The demon was the one who had eaten the real psychologist from the very beginning. However, fortunately, Simon had found the method to plant the mushroom circle at the abandoned factory. Upon receiving the news, the two of them quickly left the dangerous place. At the same time, the cannibalistic ogre, who had not eaten flesh in a long time, was at home preparing to bake. He decided that today he would replenish his nutrients, so he called his neighbor over and handed her a cake that had been enchanted. As soon as the neighbor took a bite, she could not stop eating and soon lost consciousness, continuing to eat frantically until she died from overeating. She became the cannibalistic ogre's dinner. Not only that, but he also planned to eat everyone in the town because he had hatched a wicked dragon. When the dragon grew, the poison it carried would seep into the town's drinking water. By the time everyone consumed enough of the toxin, it would be the moment the cannibalistic ogre satisfied his hunger. Some people had found the guidebook on magic and quickly returned home. Since Thimbletack had once harmed Jared, as soon as Jared saw Thimbletack, he immediately covered the mouse. However, this was clearly not the time for conflict. After some persuasion from Simon, Jared reluctantly let go. They prepared the ingredients according to the guidebook, and under Thimbletack's guidance, they added a drop of human tears. Miraculously, the big mushrooms quickly grew and formed a magical circle. Gradually, Lucinda's figure began to appear within the smoke, but in the next moment, the smoke dissipated, leaving only a glowing firefly-like fairy. When everyone thought it was Lucinda, the small fairy became frightened and immediately began flying erratically around the house, even cutting off the electricity in the old house. Thimbletack took this opportunity to hide in the shadows, and as the firefly fairy flew wildly, the place turned chaotic. The team wanted to open the window to let it fly out, but Jared firmly disagreed, as doing so would allow Thimbletack to escape. While everyone was still arguing, Jared grabbed the frying pan and killed the firefly elf. However, this action made Simon angry. Jared's recklessness disappointed him greatly. But instead of admitting his mistake, Jared struck Simon, leading the two brothers to become estranged, and their teammates fainted amid the chaos. They thought it was due to an accident, but when the power was restored, the old house was filled with people lying motionless. Clearly, the sedative poison from the wicked dragon had begun to take effect. At that moment, they had no choice but to call an ambulance to take the unconscious away. When Mallory finished handling everything and returned home, she happened to see her friend holding that firefly. She noticed her friend whispering a few words, and the firefly that Jared had killed came back to life. It seemed that this friend was not an ordinary person either. Although Jared had discovered the truth and tried to explain, his mother did not believe him at all. The flesh-eating demon had transformed back into the psychologist and openly appeared at Jared's house. Meanwhile, Simon, accompanied by the blonde girl, was planning to seek reinforcements to resolve the situation. But just as they were about to get into the car, she suddenly transformed into a bus driver. It was important to note that the blonde girl was a soul reaper demon, and anyone she transformed into would surely die. At the same time, when Jared saw the flesh-eating demon approaching his family, he immediately sent a message to Simon, the only person he trusted. However, his message couldn't be sent. It turned out that because Jared had hit Simon, Helen had followed the advice of the flesh-eating demon and canceled Jared's SIM card service. Taking advantage of the ongoing argument, the flesh-eating demon grabbed the fairy guidebook they had previously collected. With the book in the demon's hand, Jared couldn't retrieve it, but to devour everyone in the town, the demon still needed to find the last page of the book, the page that contained information about the evil dragon. Due to Simon's sudden disappearance, the entire family was very worried. Mallory, after witnessing her friend save a fairy, finally believed in the existence of these creatures and blamed them for her younger brother's disappearance. Mallory was certain that Valentina and her students had secrets they couldn't reveal. However, when Mallory confronted Valentina, she simply brewed a bowl of potion and gave two choices. One was to defeat her and learn the whole truth, and the other was to drink the potion and forget everything related to the fairies. At this point, Mallory clearly couldn't back down. Meanwhile, Jared, unsure how to deal with the flesh-eating goblin, reluctantly begged Thimbletack for help. However, the grudge between them ran too deep, and Thimbletack, hiding in the shadows, completely ignored him. Downstairs, Helen had packed her things and prepared to go out with the flesh-eating demon to search for Simon. Amid the panic, Jared took out the X-ray stone to show his mother, but the stone, which had the ability to see through the disguises of of magical creatures suddenly lost its effectiveness at a crucial moment. Clearly, the cannibalistic ogre had anticipated this. As a result, Jared could only watch helplessly as the two people left. Meanwhile, Thimbletack finally revealed himself, but only to mock Jared for killing other beings. After some time spent mocking, Thimbletack also disclosed some useful information. The painting of the wicked dragon that determined the town's fate was hidden in the mysterious old house. However, no matter how Jared turned the magical key, he still could not open the correct space containing the dragon painting. Meanwhile, Simon was on his way to the city to seek reinforcements. The blonde girl decided to take him to meet the local kitchen god. To ensure Simon, an ordinary person without magic, had a good experience, the girl used her saliva to cast a spell on his glasses. When Simon put on the glasses, he immediately saw the hidden magical creatures. However, before he could be surprised, he was pulled into the inner chamber. After the blonde girl placed the offerings on the altar, the kitchen god immediately manifested. Not wanting to waste time, the blonde girl said that a cannibalistic ogre had told her he wanted to eat an entire town. He was incredibly cruel, so she had no choice but to comply. Fearing that she would have to harm many people, she asked the kitchen god if he could help her. However, contrary to her hopes, the kitchen god appeared to be very indifferent. Seeing that things were not going well, Simon wanted to retrieve the offerings, but it was too late. The kitchen god not only wanted the offerings, but also intended to eat both of them. In the midst of the emergency, the blonde girl was attacked and held in place. Being an ordinary person, Simon went unnoticed and had the opportunity to escape. However, the kitchen gods outside clearly would not let him go so easily. On the other side, Mallory fiercely attacked Valentina to uncover the truth, but Mallory was no match for Valentina and was quickly defeated. Seeing Mallory being too aggressive, Valentina prepared a cup of magical water to help her calm down. However, the steam from the cup condensed on the mirror, reflecting Simon's situation. Mallory realized her younger brother was in danger and that she couldn't help him. She had no choice but to tell Simon to attack unexpectedly to find a way to escape. Simon complied, and sure enough, when the kitchen god wasn't paying attention, he used a frying pan to knock the kitchen god down and free the blonde girl. The two of them then ran away, but just as they escaped, the blonde girl accidentally transformed into Jared's form, signaling that Jared was about to be in danger. Seeing this, Simon could only wish he had wings to fly straight home. Mallory, having witnessed Simon in danger and unable to do anything, felt an immense regret. She blamed herself for being so obsessed with swordsmanship that she had neglected her family. This sincere regret truly moved Valentina. Seeing that the moment had come, Valentina decided to reveal the whole truth. The first thing she disclosed was her secret. The famous swordmaster in front of them did not have an arm, and her arm was merely a mass of gathered magical energy. In just one night, all the residents of the town had been infected by a strange disease, with mushrooms growing all over their faces, turning them into walking corpses. The cause of all this was the cannibalistic ogre. The people infected by the parasitic fungi completely lost consciousness, were controlled by him, and eventually became his food. Meanwhile, the cannibalistic ogre, disguised as a doctor, continuously approached Helen, easily obtaining the elven compendium they had collected. To turn the situation around, Jared relied on Thimbletack's guidance and finally used the mysterious key to open the room containing the painting of the wicked dragon. As long as the ogre did not get this painting and could not successfully hatch the dragon egg, he would not be able to eat all the residents of the town. However, it was all a trap. Jared ultimately could not escape and had to surrender the painting. Now, the cannibalistic ogre had complete control over the method of raising the wicked dragon. The small dragon egg, once properly hatched, quickly grew enormous. Along with that, the dragon's virus became increasingly powerful, causing many residents of the town to fall into a coma. Those who could still move were controlled through parasitism, turning them into nothing more than zombies. Helen, who had initially always believed that the psychologist was not an ogre, finally discovered the truth when she found her neighbor's finger in his house. But by then, it was too late. The entire town had been controlled by that ogre, and Helen was about to become the next victim. Fortunately, Jared and a few others were still alive. Valentina had previously told Mallory that to completely eliminate the cannibalistic ogre, they needed to find the divine sword. Valentina had once attempted to assassinate the cannibalistic ogre with Lucinda, but had failed, paying the price with her arm. The reason for the failure was that Valentina, being an elf, could not touch the divine sword, which meant that only humans could defeat this ogre. To find the sword, they passed through another space and arrived at the Hell Market. However, the shopkeeper demanded that they surrender 500 incisors, which left them feeling desperate, as even if they collected all the teeth from their group, they would only have a few. Fortunately, the shopkeeper was a gambling addict. He promised that if they could defeat him in a game, he would hand over the sword. If they lost, they would have to stay and work for him for life. It sounded simple, and the group was immediately ready to take their chances. However, they did not expect the shopkeeper to have exceptionally keen ears. He could hear all their plans. Luckily, Mallory was a swordswoman with the ability to control her emotions. She changed her movements and won the game. Seeing this, the shopkeeper wanted to go back on his word, but the group quickly grabbed the sword and ran away. However, even though they had the sword, only someone with a pure heart could summon the divine sword. Unfortunately, Mallory was not the chosen one, but their teammates successfully obtained the divine sword. The group immediately began to plan a hunt for the ogre. Simon pretended to surrender and tied Jared up to bring him to the cannibalistic ogre. The ogre sensed that something was off, but he had nothing left to fear. To completely break the resistance of Jared and Helen, he also prepared a dinner, even adding reishi mushroom spores to the meal. After dinner, they would be infected by the parasitic mushrooms and would be unable to resist. Meanwhile, Simon had convinced the death spirit to carry the dragon eggshell and planned to go into the forest to seek help from the other elves. If he could spread the powder from the dragon eggshell over the town, those who were in a deep sleep would awaken. In another place, Thimbletack stealthily added apples to the tea of Helen and Jared. Everything went smoothly. They used the excuse of having tea to concoct an invisibility potion in Lucinda's style, successfully disappearing before the cannibalistic ogre's eyes. Seeing his prey vanish before him, the cannibalistic ogre immediately became furious and searched the house for them. During this time, Mallory, who had been hiding, seized the opportunity to rush out and draw the ogre's attention. Losing his patience, the ogre pulled the two horns from his head and fashioned them into weapons, intending to kill Mallory immediately. At that moment, the teammates took the chance to wield the divine sword and attack from behind. But just when it was crucial, the blade vanished. Fear had corrupted the purity of their hearts, causing the sword to disappear. Seeing this, the cannibalistic ogre raised his hand to kill Mallory's teammate. In that critical moment, a flash of light appeared. Mallory successfully summoned the divine sword. She had finally done it, because there was nothing more pure than saving someone. However, even with the sword, she was still no match for the cannibalistic ogre. Even at the cost of her injuries to attack, a mere mortal like Mallory was the first to fall. Fortunately, Helen suddenly appeared just in time and used a hot iron to unexpectedly attack the cannibalistic ogre. Since they could not defeat the ogre, they had no choice but to summon a more powerful magical creature for assistance. Following Thimbletack's guidance, they needed to create the sound of wind to summon this giant creature. Everyone immediately began to mimic the sound of the wind blowing. As a result, just when the cannibalistic ogre was about to catch up and eliminate the group, a gigantic hand burst through the wall and grabbed him, pulling him away. Luckily, the cannibalistic ogre was swallowed by an even larger creature. At the same time, countless elves took to the sky, scattering the dragon egg fragments that Simon had brought throughout the town. The residents who had been in a deep sleep gradually awakened. Although the crisis had been resolved, the wicked dragon had completed its incubating and hatching process. Their instincts told them to eliminate this danger, but since the dragon had not yet begun to do evil, Jared ultimately could not bring himself to kill it. While the whole family was celebrating, another Jared ran in from outside. The newcomer accurately revealed Jared's secrets, making it impossible for everyone to distinguish who was real and who was fake. Both claimed to be the real Jared, but the new Jared proved his identity with an iron rod, as iron would burn an elf, yet he showed no signs of being affected. The atmosphere immediately became tense. The other Jared tried to explain, but in a moment of panic, Mallory stabbed the remaining Jared with her sword. Indeed, he was the imposter, and he immediately vanished. The family embraced each other in joy, but they did not realize that in the palm of the new Jared's hand was a burn, and the real Jared had not truly died. Instead, he appeared in the secret land of the elves, where Arthur Spiderwick's ancestors had been waiting for a long time. Today's movie ends here. Thank you everyone for watching. Goodbye, and see you again in the next videos. Bye bye.